Hi and welcome to week 3 of Preptober. Today is Tuesday, October 15th. Yesterday on Monday evening I started brainstorming for character names. I began by taking my notebook and making a little table with columns for Austen's characters, their role in the retelling, the name in the retelling and any additional notes I have. And then I wrote down a list of Austen's characters that will appear in my novel and also their role in the retelling. And after that I started brainstorming names. The retelling takes place in the current world, so I think that my main characters were born in the late 90s or early 2000s. So what I did was I googled the most common names in the 1990s and I wrote down a list of women's names and men's names that were popular in the 90s. And then I picked from those names the ones that I think suit my characters the best. I realized later that I had picked names for Lydia and Lizzie where the first two letters are the same, so I think I need to change Lydia's name. I also found names for a few of the minor characters. I have names for at least Charlotte and Collins. I also found names for two other minor characters. One is a woman who was born probably in the late 50s, early 60s, and another one is a man who was born in probably 60s or 70s. The two major names that I still have missing are Darcy's and Bingley's. I just haven't found names that click. And there are also a bunch of minor characters whose names I don't yet have, and I also don't have anyone's last names. But I can brainstorm those names later. Today I'll be spending the entire day doing research. Another thing I did yesterday was I wrote down a bunch of questions that I still need to find answers to. So I'm hoping that today I find answers to as many of those questions as I can. I'm starting the day productively by reading 90s celebrity gossip. Like I said, the book is not set in the 1990s, but I'm hoping that I get some inspiration. Well, these were less helpful than I had hoped. I've kept only a few magazines from the 90s as sort of keepsakes to remember what it was like to be a teenager in the 90s, and unfortunately they did not really give me any new ideas. So I'm gonna move to my laptop and start googling for answers to the questions I want to research. Well, this was productive several hours, 4 hours I think. I got lost in research rabbit holes and did not have time to figure out answers to all of my questions, but I did find answers to most of them. And what's most important is that I'm now certain that at least my plot works. Part of the reason why I got lost in rabbit holes was that I have a few minor characters and I'm not exactly sure what it is that they do for a living. I have 2 or 3 alternatives and I tried to find information about those job titles, but Google wasn't being very helpful. So that's something that I still need to think about, and I still have a few open questions that I need to research. I'm going to take a little break and come back to this in the evening, when I might either continue with the research questions or I might take my scene cards and start fleshing out scenes. been a few days since I last talked to you. It's now Saturday, October the 19th. Tuesday I was doing research and I continued doing that in the evening, and I found answers to most of my questions. I also realized that there's a slight problem with my timeline. So my initial idea for the timeline is that the book lasts about a year, just like Pride and Prejudice, and it begins in August and ends year later, the next August or September. I had planned that the characters would go to this event in either October, November or December, and I had checked that there is such an event in November. But now that I looked at it more closely, I realized that they're actually moving the event from November to spring, so around 6 months later, and that completely messes my timeline. So either the book needs to be set in the past, like pre-pandemic, but still, and that's something that I really don't want to do. The second alternative is that there is an event that takes place in November, but it takes place in Europe, and I would really want the event to be in the United States. And the third alternative is that there is an event that takes place in February. I think I'm going to go with that alternative, even though it does mean that there's going to be several months where basically nothing happens, but I think I can make it work. On Wednesday evening, after I started feeling a little better, I brainstormed the names, and I now have names for all of my characters. Finding a name for Kitty is turning out to be quite troublesome. I chose a name for her initially, and then I realized that that name is too similar to the name that I had already chosen for Lydia. So I had to change Kitty's name, and last night I realized that the second name I had chosen for Kitty is again too similar to the name that I had chosen for Lydia, so I have to change it again. I also did some location scouting on Wednesday and spent a lot of time looking at Google Maps and listings for Hollywood mansions. On Thursday I finally started working on the scene outlines. I outlined 5 scenes on Thursday evening and another 5 yesterday on Friday. So that's what I'm going to continue doing today. My goal is hopefully to get at least 10 more scenes outlined. If I can do more, that would be great, but I'll be happy with 10. So let me set up my desk and I'll show you how I'm doing it. So here's my Word document for the outline. I start with the scene number, where I usually add a little note on what happens, just so I can find the scene more easily and fast. Then there's a longer summary of what happens in the scene and a little description of setting, like the place, the time of day, and sometimes also how fast after the previous scene. The next list of questions comes from John Ruby's The Anatomy of Story. So there's a mention of a position in character arc. What do you need to accomplish with this scene and how are you going to accomplish it? I don't always answer to these 2 questions because I think they're more meta-level questions, and I don't always need to tell myself what I need to accomplish and how I'm going to accomplish it. The next 2 questions, what does the character want or what is their goal, and how the character plans to reach the goal, I also usually answer these 2 questions in the same answer. The same is true for the next 2 questions, what obstacles do they face and who opposes the desire. Usually when I explain what obstacles the character faces, I also tell who opposes the desire, so I don't need 2 separate answers. The last 2 questions are how does the desire resolve and possible twist or self-revelation. I don't always have a twist or self-revelation. The next part is scene and sequel. This comes from Steve Alcorn's How to Fix Your Novel. His idea is that there are scenes which are action and sequels which are reaction. So scenes have goal, conflict and disaster, and sequels have emotion, thought, decision and action. Usually the scene questions I answer when I tell how the character plans to reach their goal and what obstacles they face. So I'm gonna continue from scene 11 onwards and try to get 10 more scenes done. One thing I forgot to mention as I was talking about the names is that I would still need a band name. And band name generators really aren't helping. So if you have any suggestions for a good band name, leave them in the comments. Anyway, I have my scene cards and my notebook for any questions that I might have, so let's get started. It's 3 p.m. and I've now outlined 10 more scenes. So in total I've outlined 20 scenes out of the 53 scenes I have planned. Because of the changes I made to the timeline, there are a few places where I need to add, if not a full scene, at least some sort of summary of the things that happened during the time where nothing important happens. I also needed to do a little bit more research to make sure that the things that I've planned actually work. But at this point my brain is getting a bit frazzled, so I think this is a good time to stop this week's Preptobering. I will continue next week and hopefully get the remaining 33 scenes outlined. So I'll see you next week for week 4 of Preptober.